Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. In honor of the historic announcement by NASA on the fact that Mars has regularly flowing water on the surface, I figured, you know what, from a geek perspective, what does that mean? First off, it's fascinating. And our missions to Mars, what NASA has planned for us, and eventually humans being on Mars. There are so many different possibilities and wonderful possibilities, even though it's years, maybe decades off before that actually happens. We're learning a lot almost every day from the Mars rovers that have gone to Mars, from all the different space exploration we've had. And I just thought it would be appropriate. It occurred to me to have a segment here on the episode of the podcast about Mars and some of the best alien invasion movies. Sometimes we're the invaders, sometimes they're Martians, sometimes it's more than Martians. And this particular group of movies I'm going through, they're in no particular order as to my favorite movie, but they're just different ones. First off, and the most obvious one that comes to mind, Mars Attacks. It was great. It had Michael J. Fox in it, and the president was Jack Nicholson. So whenever you can have Jack Nicholson as the president of the United States, I mean, how super awesome is that? I was just very excited when this movie came out, and it's definitely one of my favorite movies to watch. And it takes the whole 1950s fascination with aliens invading from Mars, and like the invasion of the body snatchers is one movie I think about. There's some other ones back from like 1951, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and it had the big robot in it. And there's also, which I don't want to mention, the 2008 version of The Day the Earth Stood Still with Keanu Reeves, which was terrible. I try to give movies a chance, but it really was kind of bad. That's one, but you have other movies, you have different alien type movies like The Blob and all these classic movies, some in black and white, some in Technicolor, some that were attempts at 3D back in the 50s, 60s, and all that. Basically, during the Red Scare between the United States and Russia, there was a big fear back then. And one of the biggest movies in that era was based on the 1898 novel or story by H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds. Now, the original came out in 1953, and it probably is maybe my all-time favorite Mars movie. The other thing about that is, in 2005, that Steven Spielberg produced and Tom Cruise starred in. I'll tell you, I was not disappointed with that movie. It actually has a good replay value because Tom Cruise is basically a kind of a deadbeat dad, and he's doing his own thing, and his teenage son and him don't get along. And it's got Dakota Fanning in it, who's kind of irritating, but also she's Dakota Fanning. So back when she was younger, she was really in a lot of different movies. She was in another Steven Spielberg TV series that they had where she was an alien and all that, which is actually kind of a good series. But in this version of War of the Worlds from 2005, to me it was very true to the original, even though some things weren't. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't 100% totally true to the H.G. Wells novel, or story, I should say. But it really updated things. And coming just about, 3 or 4 years after 9/11, it was kind of scary because you still had some of the images of people escaping the towers. And after all the destruction of that, to see a movie like that was kind of... the destruction in it was kind of scary there. And another movie that I've got a lot on my list here that I've just made up. One of them, and this is probably one of my all-time favorite movies, especially if we're talking about suspense-related movies that don't always show everything, and I always describe this as like a Hitchcock type of movie, where it teases all the way through, and you think there's going to be a crescendo, and then boom, there's nothing. But it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie, back when he made really good movies, and lately he just had The Visit out, which was a pretty decent success on a small budget. But the movie I'm talking about from 2002 is Signs with Mel Gibson. Signs was very much a deep kind of philosophical movie that you basically had Mel Gibson's character, who was a preacher. So Mel Gibson's wife gets killed in a car accident and he loses his faith. So he's doubting everything, and then they're hearing on the radio about the alien invasion that's happening, and all they can hear is what's on the radio, and they basically are in their farmhouse, and there's such suspense in this movie. Signs, it really scares you. The worst part was, that got me when I saw it in the theater originally, was, and many times after it still gets me, is when they think the invasion's over. That's what they're hearing on the radio after everything happens, and they think they're safe, and they're coming to the house, and then he's looking for his son, because they're holed up in the cellar down there. Now, he turns around and he sees a reflection in the television, and it's an alien, and he's holding like his, whatever comes out of his hand at his son's throat, and he's going to kill his son. He's like, please don't, and all this, and then his brother picks up the baseball bat. He says, swing away, Merle. And what they find out is these aliens, they came from Mars or from wherever. They came to Earth. Now, Earth is roughly, 70, 80%, probably about 75% water. But they came here for our natural resources. But what you find out inadvertently is that they come in contact with water, because while they're landing in the farmlands and other places away from water, they found out that water like burns their skin and all that and kills them, which is so strange. It makes no sense, but it works in the movie, trust me. So his brother swings away and knocks all the water off of these glasses they had on the mantelpiece onto him. And then he takes the son outside, and it's a very emotional thing. And his son has bad asthma and all that. So if you really have bad asthma, this movie might really get you. But he takes his son out, and he's like, please let his lungs be enclosed. Please let him be closed. And he's like praying to God, and please, please, please save him. And then eventually the son's okay. But Signs by M. Night Shyamalan with Mel Gibson in it, awesome movie. One of my favorites there. We're also looking at other movies, and this could more than likely be also probably my most rewatchable sci-fi movie for like alien invasions and attacks and all that. And it's Independence Day. Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy. Will Smith was in this, and this movie, which came out in 1996, and it's 2015. Next year will be, what's that, 20 years? So it still holds up. Independence Day, I could still watch it, even though you have how they fight with the little virus and all that from their antiquated computers compared to now. You're wondering, like, how do these aliens were so sophisticated, but then this low-tech computer virus that we created basically on DOS or something like that, how that could defeat them. But it worked in the film, and you have to suspend a little bit of disbelief on any of these movies anyway. So, but still, one of the not just funniest, I mean, it has some very funny moments, but one of the best movies. And that gentleman that plays the president, he is probably the epitome of the president. It gets you very nationalistic for your country, I suppose. Here's one that I have to mention that was so big back in 82 when it came out, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. E.T. Go Home. I remember growing up and watching. I was younger and all, but I remember seeing it later in life and appreciating it more. Once again, another Spielberg movie. And E.T. is one of the top movies of all time, box office wise, and it pulls at your heartstrings. It really does, because E.T. just literally wants to get home, and he befriends this child, and it shows how inhumane we are to something that is alien to us, essentially this alien. But it's a comment on how we treat each other, and maybe how we treat people that are different than us, and it holds up. You could watch E.T. today, and you could say E.T., and people would know almost instantly what you were talking about. Now, we get into some other ones here, and this is part of the Odyssey series, and the movie's done by Stanley Kubrick. 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's from 1968. Some people consider this one of the best science fiction movies ever created. I don't know if I totally agree with that. I did enjoy it. I just remember it didn't have a lot of dialogue in the movie. And I remember growing up, I just thought it was really strange, and I saw it. It came out before I was born, but I saw it later growing up, and I'm like, this is a strange movie, but it's interesting. And then you have, of course, the bad guy in that is a computer, and he goes by HAL 9000, which, by the way, I had to look this up because I did not know this, but HAL stands for Hierostali Programmed Algorithm Computer, and I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but basically it's a computer that can anticipate outcomes and do it at such an advanced rate. But HAL 9000, famous for the line, "I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that." And that's how he talked. So if you haven't seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, you must see that. Now, the sequel came in 1984. Once again, this was during the Cold War, so it came out in 1984, so it was Soviets and the United States, and things weren't so great with our relations with each other. But it starred Roy Scheider, and it takes place 9 years after the events in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it's called 2010: The Year We Make Contact. It tried to explain a lot of things as best as it could, and you had a gentleman that became the Star Child, and it was like going to a different state of consciousness because they were going to find out, I think the name of the ship was the Discovery, that was lost around the moons of Jupiter, and it's interesting. It always kind of reminded me with the monolith, it reminded me a little bit of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which came out in, 78? So anyway, there are some other movies that on this list that I like. Battle Los Angeles, that came out in 2011, that starred the gentleman who played Harvey Two-Face in Dark Knight. And I thought Battle Los Angeles was really done well. It was about as believable as alien invasion could be. You have other movies like Battleship that wasn't so good, that it worked on certain levels. Of course, you have, for 1979, we have the movie Alien and all of its sequels. And that includes even Prometheus, which I liked. And the new news coming out this week is Prometheus will have 2 sequels, but it won't be called Prometheus. It's going to be called Alien. I'll tease it for later so you can figure it out. Tweet us back at Geek Homeworld if you know the title of the new Prometheus sequel. So I'm just testing you here to see if you're listening, okay? But anyway, we have some other ones that came out in 2009, was done like a documentary, and it was about some aliens that got stranded, I think in South Africa, and their ship was stranded in the air. They had a catastrophic event on there. And so basically they created this District 9, which is the name of the movie, and it came out in 2009, ironically. And it was a very strange movie, and you really were kind of rooting for the aliens. And you had this British documentary guy who went through there, and he was just, you were kind of glad when things happened bad to him because it just seemed like he wasn't as friendly to them. Now, 2010, it came up before Battle Los Angeles, but Skyline, I didn't like as much. I think Battle Los Angeles was much more believable than how Skyline was. It was okay. Now, if we want to talk a little bit looser from this topic, alien invasions, you could include Marvel's The Avengers from 2012, because you had a Chitauri invasion, and they were invaders from outer space that came through basically a wormhole that Loki used his staff to open up, etc., and the Tesseract. So you could kind of call that an alien invasion. The Transformers movie that began in 2007 and all the sequels for that, there were definitely some elements of alien invasions and all that, and like especially in Revenge of the Fallen. If you want to say Man of Steel, from 2013, basically you had Kryptonians who came to Earth and they invaded Earth, essentially. So, And then the Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice, which is coming out next year in 2016, is going to be over the top great. And they treat the events of Man of Steel, treating him as an alien, as he technically is. He came from Krypton, the story of Superman. And anyway, in all the destruction, Batman turns really hard. An older version of Batman played by Ben Affleck. And so you have Batman versus Superman. Probably by the end, they are all buddies and everything. And recently, this has kind of disturbed me because I always wanted Man of Steel 2 before I wanted Batman versus Superman. But Zack Snyder's basically saying that, and from looking at the film, you can almost say the same thing, but Man of Steel 2 really is Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice. So that's kind of our look, and I'm sure there's a lot more movies I didn't include in here. Oh, here's one. Let's leave it with this one. In fact, I wanted to leave it with this one. It's a movie from 1997, and there were other sequels, second and a third one. But Men in Black. So I guess at the end of this, you're going to forget this entire episode because we're going to flash you with that little pin that they had, Will Smith again. And we're called Men in Black. The good guys dressed in black. Remember that. In case you're ever face to face and make contact. The title held by me, MIB, is what you thought you saw. You did not see. No, I did not just try to rap. That was not an attempt at a rap. I can do much better. But anyway, this concludes our Mars/alien invasion movies. And you can use this list on here when you're thinking of getting closer to Halloween and you say, hey, what are some good movies to watch, okay? And from a geek perspective. So from our geek perspective, these are some of ours. And watch out for the Martians. The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming, as Lex Luthor said. And Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. Can't wait for that. Also, let's learn from Mars attacks, and let's still try to be friendly when the Martians come. Let's not start an interstellar war here, okay? And I'm sure there's a James Kirk somewhere coming along, a Zephyr Cochrane making first contact with alien species too. So they can be benevolent, they can be friendly, they don't always have to be here to destroy us, and let's not destroy them, okay? Let's all work together. Can't we all just get along in this universe? All right.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
The last segment dealt with Martians or extraterrestrials invading Earth. Now we're going to flip the script here and talk about Terrans or Earthlings invading Mars. And with NASA announcing recently flowing water on Mars, it put me in that mindset of Mars movies. And I recently saw The Martian starring Matt Damon. Earlier this century, we had Mission to Mars with Gary Sinise, and then we had Red Planet with Val Kilmer. But to me, when you compare The Martian to that, The Martian is a vast improvement. For me, a couple years ago, we had Gravity, which seemed less fact-based on science, and it was more Hollywood spectacular special effects. Then we had Interstellar, which was transcendent and metaphysical in definitely a different way. But The Martian felt real. It was based upon more actual science, and that's probably because of all the involvement with NASA. I mean, NASA provided photos and videos and stuff of even how terminals should look and spaceships, even down to all the particulars of what the trip would involve from Earth to Mars and back, and all that science, that real science. I did see it in 3D. I thought the 3D was good. Now, because The Walk is out, it's been dominating all the IMAX screens this week. So The Martian was not in IMAX, and I think it could have benefited very much so from IMAX 3D. And even in the regular Real D 3D that I saw The Martian in, the sandstorms looked very real. I really felt like I was in the sandstorms themselves. And it was interesting in the movie. I liked the fact that there was humor in this. Matt Damon had some very comical lines in here and had a pretty good spirit for someone who was trapped all these different years on Mars. in between the rescue missions and everything. And it had an unusual happy ending. So there was another point. It did, for me, feel like a little contrived. If there's one thing I have to pull out of here, when the Chinese ended up helping NASA, that felt like an attempt to kind of overtly influence the international box office. And it kind of reminded me of the last Transformers movie, and that kind of did the same thing. The last part of that movie was almost completely in China, and it worked, I guess, for the movie and the storyline. And for this one, the Chinese to come in at the last minute and help America, it kind of showed things united. But this was a very nationalistic movie, The Martian. It showed the whole world pulling for bringing back home of Matt Damon's character in The Martian, and the Chinese helping out America was a nice little touch there when they provided the rocket that even America did not know that they had at the time. So this movie draws on some other comparisons of maybe Robinson Crusoe and even Tom Hanks in Castaway. You know, the one person being stranded. Instead of an island, it was another planet. And also it reminded me of Jodie Foster's Contact, which ironically had Matthew McConaughey in it, who is also in Interstellar. It was just about nearly a perfect movie. So that's my preview of The Martian. And if you haven't seen it, I would suggest that you get out there and you go check it out. And definitely check it out in 3D. I think it's worth it.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
We're talking about Gotham, Season 2, Episode 2, Rise of the Villains, Knock Knock. The big point in this episode, the Maniax rise, led by Jerome, soon to be the Joker. We see Theo Gallivan is grooming the Maniax basically in this episode. There's a great scene where Jerome is playing Russian roulette and he becomes officially the leader of the Maniax. Later on, we see Bruce fires Alfred because Alfred goes and breaks Thomas's Wayne computer that they find in the Batcave that has all these possible secrets on it. Anyway, though, he has a change of heart later. Bruce says, "Please come back, Alfred, only if you'll train me and fix the computer." And then we go ahead and we see the Maniacs throw people off of the Gotham Gazette building, spelling out Maniacs on the concrete down there, and another crazy moment of the Maniacs. And there's a school bus incident where we see with the cheerleaders where Dobkins gets caught and then killed by Tabitha Gallivan, who snipes him when Gordon's trying to get him to give up the goods on the group. We also see Commissioner Essen tell Gordon that she will not give up in the face of all the tyranny and the Maniacs, and that it's, quote, a new day. And that's a theme that runs through this episode. We see Edward Nygma trying to ask Kristen Kringle out, and he fails at that miserably. But then later on, there's an ensuing battle, and he saves her life. But in between, he has a little bit of a psychotic break talking with himself there. Then there's this wonderful moment that we have in the episode of Alfred and Lucius Fox, played by Chris Chalk. And they have pretty much a who do you trust talk. And we also learned that Lucius Fox is great if you need computer repair, so that's the man to call. Barbara, speaking of calling, she gives Jim a phone call and lures him away from the police station while the Maniacs go and massacre everyone there, including Commissioner Essen. Then we see Jim Gordon come back in from being beat up by one of the thugs there of the Maniacs, and he talks with Commissioner Essen. And he's like, stay with me. And she's like, it's a new day, Jim. And then she dies. And sorry to see Commissioner Essen die. She was awesome. Then we see that Bullock is back on the force, which is awesome. And James Gordon career seems to be looking up because all these people in power positions keep dying and he keeps getting promoted. Next, we have Jerome telling Gotham in a very Joker-like moment that you ain't seen nothing yet. Basically, when all that occurs, after that I tweeted that I was so glad to meet Lucius Fox, and commented that the acting was spot on with intense action, and Chris Chalk, who plays Lucius, retweeted some of my tweets and favorited them. So I really appreciate that, Mr. Chalk. I appreciate that so much. And also, I want to tell you on the podcast this week, we were able to talk to a friend of the podcast, Whitney D., who has performed on Gotham. And you can check out our interview with her. It's on our Geek Chat feature at geekhomeworld.blogspot.com. You'll also see photos from the Gotham set and other shows that she's worked on. So please check that out. And talking about other followers that we have, I want to also say thanks to Melanie, and her Twitter handle is @Hudson_Melanie, who tweeted, quote, "Geek Homeworld just gets better with each episode." We're all about our listeners, and we thank you for listening. And remember, it's a new day. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.
Geek Homeworld.